Okay. Right. The House Ethics and Oversight Committee will come to order. Would the clerk please take the attendance?
Chair Burns.
Here.
Representatives Hope. Here. Breen. Churches.
Present.
Hoskins.
Here.
Wagella.
Here.
Kuntz.
Here.
Wozniak.
Here.
Harris.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have 8 members present. You do have a quorum.
Thank you. All right. Representative Hope moves to adopt the meeting minutes from our April 25th, 2024 meeting. There being no objection, the motion will prevail by unanimous consent. Welcome, everyone. At today's committee meeting, we will begin with a presentation from the Office of the Auditor General to discuss their report on the Michigan Liquor Control Commission that was completed in March of 2024. Following their presentation, members will have time to ask at least one question each. Then we will have a presentation from the Michigan Liquor Control Commission, after which time members will also have time to ask one question each. As always, if time allows, we will have time and space for members to ask more than one question. Given that our committee runs right up until session, we do need to be conscious of time. All right, so at this time, I would like to invite the Auditor General's office to come to the table. Please turn your mics on. And we'll have you begin your presentation. And joining us, we have the Principal Audit Supervisor, Rebecca Murray, and Audit Supervisor, Natalie Heckman, from the Michigan Office of the Auditor General. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Burns and the committee members for inviting us here to present our audit report on the Michigan Liquor Control Commission selected operational processes and IT systems. I am Becky Murray, an audit supervisor, and with me is Natalie Heckman, an audit supervisor. I will provide an overview of the audit, findings 1 and 2, and then Natalie will walk you through finding 3, the observation, and an overview of the reportable conditions. The Michigan Liquor Control Commission, or MLCC, is the sole wholesaler of spirit products in the state of Michigan. The commission is responsible for licensing the manufacture, distribution, and sale of all beer, wine, distilled spirits, and mixed spirit drinks in the state. MLCC, in conjunction with the Department of Technology, Management, and Budget, or DTMB, uses several IT systems to license manufacturers, wholesalers, and retailers and manage online spirit orders and product distribution. MLCC contracts with 3 authorized distribution agents, or ADAs, who warehouse and distribute spirit products in Michigan on behalf of the state. Revenues generated through this process totaled approximately $1.6 billion in fiscal year 2022. Our audit focused on MLCC's efforts to comply with selected state laws, regulations, and policies for the sale and distribution of spirit products, interface controls over selected liquor systems, and security and user access controls over selected liquor systems. Our audit generally covered processing in place between October 2020 and August 2022. The scope of the audit included spirit products and did not include beer, wine, and mixed spirits. We identified 3 material findings, 4 reportable conditions, and 1 observation. MLCC and DTMB agreed with all findings. Our first objective begins on page 9. The objective was to assess the sufficiency of MLCC's efforts to comply with selected state laws, regulations, and policies for the sale and distribution of spirit products. We determined MLCC's efforts were not sufficient. Finding 1 begins on page 10. It states MLCC did not provide adequate oversight of ADAs to ensure all state-owned spirits received and distributed by ADAs were reflected within the state's purchase and sale records, nor did state inventory balances accurately reflect spirit products on hand at the ADA warehouses. Part A states MLCC did not perform reconciliations of inventory purchased from vendors to ensure the quantity of spirits MLCC purchased each day was reasonable, based on the quantity of spirits ADAs asserted were ordered and delivered to retailers. MLCC also did not reconcile system retail orders with deliveries to ensure that MLCC's sales were reasonable based on the quantities delivered to retailers. Part B states MLCC did not have a process to track and monitor spirit orders retailers place directly with ADAs because ADAs provide final documentation to MLCC after delivery. From February 2021 until August 2022, $1.1 billion in spirit orders were submitted directly to the ADAs and not placed in the state's online ordering system. With orders made directly to ADAs, MLCC should have a mechanism in place, whether through the system or another method, to be notified of all retailers' orders. Additionally, MLCC did not prohibit ADAs from delivering spirit products to retailers prior to MLCC taking ownership of the product. This could result in MLCC recording a sale before the inventory is owned, causing a negative inventory balance. Part C on page 11 states MLCC cannot conduct an accurate, timely physical inventory because even though inventory adjustments are made weekly, a 2 to 3 week delay exists in MLCC's process. Also, state and vendor-owned spirit products are commingled in the physical inventory counts. For example, MLCC's procedure is to count the entire inventory for a specific product in an ADA warehouse. If MLCC inventory records indicate it owns 50 bottles and MLCC counts 300 bottles, MLCC takes the position the first 50 bottles belong to the state. MLCC's process assumes the vendor would agree that they own 250 bottles, equaling the total of 300 bottles physically present in the warehouse. If the vendor believes that they own 275 bottles, it would be up to the ADA to work with the vendor to determine the cause of the 25 bottle discrepancy. On page 12, we note current legislation does not clearly define ADA responsibilities, but does define MLCC's duty and statutory authority to exercise complete control over alcoholic beverage traffic within the state. Finding 2 begins on page 14. MLCC did not have sufficient controls to monitor and manage state spirit inventory, resulting in excessive and negative spirit inventory balances. MLCC's process to purchase and resell spirits is on an as-needed basis on daily orders, based on daily orders from retailers. Therefore, MLCC's inventory on hand should generally be minimal. Our analysis covered inventory balances between October 2020 and July 2022. Part A on page 15 states MLCC did not always purchase spirit inventory prior to recording sales to retailers, resulting in negative inventory balances. Our review noted total negative spirit inventory on any given week ranged from approximately negative 9,000 bottles to negative 900,000 bottles, valued at approximately $115,000 to $6.6 million respectively for all spirit inventory between October 2020 and July 2022. We also noted as of July 2022 that 520 unique spirit products had negative inventory balances. We determined 161 of these product balances were negative due to ADA changes. Each unique spirit product in the state can only be distributed by one ADA. Inventory at the prior ADA had not been reconciled by MLCC. Generally, a negative inventory balance occurs when the ADA delivers the spirit product to a retailer but does not include the product delivered in the order documentation submitted to MLCC, or MLCC inaccurately calculates purchases. Therefore, MLCC does not purchase the spirit. Part B on page 15 and continued on page 16 states MLCC did not effectively monitor inventory balances, resulting in excessive accumulated inventory balances for various spirit products for an extended period of time. Exhibits 2 through 4 on pages 42 through 47 depict the examples noted in Part B of this finding. Specifically, we identified instances where MLCC purchased spirits with no sales of those spirits in the week of purchase. MLCC purchased quantities in excess of the weekly sales, and MLCC did not account for inventory on hand when calculating purchase quantities, resulting in growing inventory balances for some products. On page 17, MLCC informed us excessive spirit inventory balances could occur if the ADAs do not submit all daily invoice files to MLCC and MLCC does not record the sale, or MLCC system does not accurately account for the inventory on hand when calculating the inventory purchases, or the documentation ADAs provide contain errors in the quantity of the spirit product ordered or delivered, resulting in MLCC purchasing or reselling an inaccurate amount of inventory. Or lastly, ADAs submit the daily order files and ship the spirits to the retailer, and MLCC appropriately purchases the product for resale, Later, ADAs report spirit products broken, returned, or refused during delivery. And as a result, MLCC purchased more product than was needed, which adds to the accumulation of inventory through the normal course of business. Now Natalie will walk you through finding number 3, the observation, and the reportable conditions.
Finding 3 begins on page 20. It states MLCC did not effectively manage state-owned spirit inventory housed at ADA warehouses. As a result, MLCC potentially received refunds from vendors for state-owned inventory which may have already been distributed to retailers. We reviewed MLCC's physical inventory count procedures, analyzed state-owned inventory balances, and conducted a physical inventory at one ADA's warehouses. Part A on page 20 states MLCC did not conduct physical inventory counts of state-owned spirits in any of the ADA's warehouses between October 2019 and July 2022. Part B on page 20 and continued on page 21 states MLCC did not have adequate controls to ensure physical inventory counts match the state's inventory records. Specifically, MLCC identified a significant portion of state-owned spirit inventory missing from ADA warehouses between January and February 2022. In lieu of doing a physical inventory count, MLCC asked the ADAs to review the state-owned spirit inventory and confirm what inventory was not in their warehouses. As noted in the table on page 20, according to MLCC's records, state-owned inventory recorded for the 3 ADAs totaled approximately 521,000 bottles with a value of $4.9 million. However, upon the ADA's recount, approximately 62,300 bottles were missing, totaling approximately $1 million. In addition, we sampled 65 spirit products and performed a physical inventory at the ADA warehouses. Our inventory account identified 7 of the 65 spirit products were either missing or had insufficient inventories during our site visits in August 2022. Our first objective also included 2 reportable conditions. Finding number 4 on page 23 related to monitoring state-owned spirit inventory balances to ensure unsellable inventory is returned to the vendor. And finding number 5 on page 25 related to improving controls over liquor license management. Next, we will discuss the observation on the impacts of liquor license quotas beginning on page 27. An observation generally does not have all the elements required by auditing standards to be reported as a finding. However, it provides commentary on certain details or events that may be of interest to the legislature or other users of the report. Again, on page 27, the observation states that MLCC uses license quotas to identify the maximum number of certain retail liquor license types, which can be issued within a local governmental unit or an LGU. However, Michigan law allows for other situations to occur in which license availability within an LGU can be negative, thereby preventing businesses from obtaining a new license unless specific circumstances apply. State laws define quota limits for the number of certain on-premises and specially designated distributor, or SDD licenses, based on each LGU's population. On-premises and SDD licenses are retail liquor licenses that allow for the sale of spirits to consumers. State law also allows MLCC to issue SDD licenses exceeding the quota if there is no existing SDD licensee within 2 miles of the applicant. Also, state law sections define rules for transferring licenses between LGUs when the license is in escrow status. Once transferred, these licenses will count against the quota of the LGU which originally issued the license, even if the licensee operates in a different LGU. When the population in LGU increases or decreases, the LGU quota is then increased or decreased respectively. MLCC cannot revoke issued licenses when a quota decreases, which could then result in negative licenses available. As noted in the table on page 27, where the population decreased from 2010 to 2020 in a specific LGU, the quotas for each license type also decreased. We reviewed select licenses within a sample of LGUs and determined the licenses reviewed were issued in accordance with the quota laws at the time of issuance. We also analyzed all LGUs with on-premises or SDD licenses as of June 13, 2022, to determine the total number of LGUs with negative license availabilities and the LGUs with the highest number of negative available licenses. For instance, as noted in our table on page 28, Detroit's on-premises and SDD licenses have the largest negative availability. This is due to population declines over time, which then changes the number of licenses allowed, and allowances in the law to issue STD licenses over the quota limit. When the number of available licenses is negative, new retail license applicants will not be granted a license unless one of the following occurs. A current licensee relinquishes their license to MLCC and the license availability becomes positive, or the 2-mile condition is met, which applies to STD licenses only, or an existing licensee sells their license to an applicant approved by MLCC, resulting in a transfer. When a license is transferred, the applicant may have substantially higher costs than purchasing the license directly from MLCC. As noted in the chart on page 29, an applicant will pay up to $1,070 to obtain a license from MLCC. However, when purchasing a license from private sale or transfer, the cost can range from $50,000 to $350,000 or more, because existing licenses may be legally purchased and transferred to a business. While license transfers must be approved by MLCC, the terms of the sale are not regulated. Michigan laws currently allow for situations in which license availability can be negative in an LGU as a result of population decreases or allowable quota exemptions, such as the 2-mile condition. Businesses desiring to obtain a license must choose one of the following options. They must wait for a license to become available from the state, or they must pay other businesses willing to sell and transfer their existing licenses. Without significant effort, MLCC may not be able to accurately determine the originating LGU of a transferred license due to the number of times a license might be transferred over an extended period of time, and therefore cannot ensure the accuracy of licenses issued against an LGU's quota. The impacts of liquor license quotas could be further evaluated to determine if the current processes and controls over license management should be reassessed or if amendments to the current law are appropriate. Page 30 of the observation includes several topics for consideration, including but not limited to, should population be used to define quotas? Are there alternative methods for calculating quotas? And should licensing price and availability be further analyzed? Lastly, our audit included 2 other objectives. Starting on page 31, our second audit objective was to assess the sufficiency of MLCC and DTMB's interface controls over selected liquor systems. We noted 1 reportable condition relating to improving controls over the liquor IT system interfaces. Lastly, on page 35, our third audit objective was to assess the sufficiency of MLCC's and DTMB's security and user access controls over selected liquor systems. We noted 1 reportable condition relating to fully establishing and implementing access controls over the selected IT liquor systems. Thank you for your time and consideration. We will now address any questions related to the audit.
All right. Thank you both so much. We appreciate your presentation. All right, I'll kick us off with the first question, and if members have questions, just give us a wave as well, and we'll go through all of those. So I'm looking at finding 1, page 11, letter C, where the 2 to 3 week delay in the process is noted. Can you talk to us a little bit more about why that delay exists?
So our understanding is that in week 1, MLCC would receive the order and the invoice documentation from the ADAs. They would create the purchase documentation, and the 2 to 3 week delay is the time it takes for them to process that information.
Okay.
I think the department can better speak to why that exists.
Okay, great. I'll follow up with them on that. Thank you. That is helpful. All right, Rep. Breen, please go ahead.
Thank you. This is a lot to digest. I am wondering, though, what impact, if any, did COVID have on this? Because if I'm accurate in my recollection, during COVID, liquor sales skyrocketed and alcohol sales skyrocketed. So I'm wondering if that had anything to do with any possible discrepancies or MLCC's inability to keep up with what was happening.
As far as how that impacted them specifically, I think that the agency would be better able to speak to that. I do know that regarding like their on-site inventory visits, they did pause those during COVID because of the restrictions that were in place on on-site work during that time period. But I think the agency would probably be able to better speak to that than we can.
Okay, and just as a side note, I'm thinking about all the many ways businesses got creative with alcohol sales, whether they moved operations outside, we have the ready-to-go drinks. I just don't know what, if any, impact that had on this. So it's just a general, broad question I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rep. Breen. Representative Wozniak, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your report. I'll incorporate two questions into one so I don't get hit with my extra question. So the ADA direct ordering seems to be excessive, or it's outside the real system of getting liquor out to the distributors. What did you find as far as the process, the efficiency at that point? Does it affect any efficiencies? Or is that the best way to do it now, is you have the ADAs get those direct orders? Because that's an excessive amount, it seems. Go ahead.
And it was a large amount. I think when we looked at it, it was approximately 20%, between 20 and 25% of the sales. There are exceptions in the law that allow for emergency orders to go directly to the ADAs. In talking with the agency, our understanding is that it was more efficient for them to do it that way because of the large orders that were being placed by some of the larger retailers.
That was my question, whether or not it's more efficient.
I believe that was what they asserted to us. I think the agency would be able to give more detail on that.
Okay, and then one other, with that question, there's a sentence on page 15, the MLCC and the DTMB had difficulty properly running the job without the one departed employee and therefore stopped running the job. So was that a negative on the efficiency again of the process? And why was there only one employee and no backup on that? Do you know? You might not know.
As far as why there was only one employee, we're not sure. As to whether it had the negative impact, it prevented them from purchasing that negative inventory. So there were time periods
So they just quit doing it.
where they were using and selling the inventory but not making the payment to the vendor.
Yeah.
for that.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rep. Okay, I have another question for you. We're talking about this negative inventory balance. Can you talk to us a little bit more about what causes that and what, if anything, you feel the state can do to kind of prevent that moving forward?
So the negative inventory is caused when the ADAs are delivering the spirit product prior to the state making the purchase of it. As far as what to do to prevent it is, in the report, I think we outlined that one of the concerns we had was that they're not ensuring that the state takes ownership prior to those ADAs delivering.
Okay, so that would be a step that they could take. Okay, thank you, appreciate it. Are there other questions from members for the Auditor General's team while we have them? All right. Okay, seeing no other questions, I want to thank you both for your presentation. And of course, if members think of questions or have things to follow up on afterwards, I'm sure you all will be available for that. So we appreciate your time today and your presentation, and thank you to the members for their questions. All right. Thank you. All right, and at this time, I would like to invite up Kevin Kubacki, the Deputy Bureau Director with the Finance and Administrative Services Bureau within LARA, along with Carrie Crone, Business Manager with the Liquor Control Commission, to discuss the work of their team, recent developments as well. They'll have a presentation for us. I believe members have handouts in front of them as well, so we can refer to that. And then, as always, we will take questions at the end. So welcome, everyone. Please make sure that your mics are on when you're ready to speak, and we'll have you begin as soon as you're ready.
Thank you, committee, for the invitation to be here today. My name's Kevin Kubacki. I also serve as LARA's Internal Control Officer. I have, again, Carrie Crone. She is the Business Manager for the Liquor Control Commission. To kick things off, I'm going to turn it over to Carrie to provide some general educational information about the Liquor Control Commission, and then I'll touch on some of the audit specifics. Carrie?
Good morning, Madam Chair and representatives. We are very happy to be here today. Thank you. I am going to actually take just a moment, if you're good, and I'd like to introduce just a few individuals we have with us today. So I'm going to start off with our individual helping us here with our slides, David Marvin. He's acting director in our agency services division. We also have, if you just raise your hand, Pam and Rochelle, our director and deputy director of our finance division. And we also have Jason, who is with our IT liaison. Jason actually helps make sure that anytime I get that blue screen that pops up on the computer, that I can still stay functional. So he kind of jokes with me about that. But and then also we have a number of individuals here today just listening. We have representatives from our ADAs, our authorized distribution agents, as well as I know a number of individuals that represent a lot of our retail licensees and their organizations. So I thank everybody for being here and your support. And I know all of them would be available at future times if any of you have more specific questions of them. So again, really appreciate being here today. I'm going to cover just some background of the MLCC and as well as a little bit of history before we get into some of the comments on the audit. So the Michigan Liquor Control Commission was created by the legislature in 1933 on the repeal of prohibition. We are also outlined in the Constitution of '63. We are empowered to regulate the alcohol beverage traffic within the state of Michigan. I just want to acknowledge that 1933, last year, we celebrated MLCC our 90th birthday. And we are so pleased. We had a great celebration. We acknowledged one of our very first special licenses that was ever issued by our team, as well as then later in the year in December had a big celebration for the actual 90th anniversary for the repeal of prohibition. Those two things allow us to do what we do every day, as well as those that we partner with and support us, and also allow our businesses and our consumers in the state to have their access. The Liquor Control Commission is a Type 1 agency regulated within the Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs. And our mission is to make alcohol beverages available for consumption while protecting the consumer and the general public through the regulation of those involved in the sale and distribution of the products. The act is set forth also to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of the state. We actually, based on our recent renewal information, as well as any new additional licenses and permits issued up until June 6, when we pulled this information, we have over 107,000 licenses and permits. We have 42,209 licenses and 65,197 permits. So we do have a lot of work that we do throughout the year, as well as at our annual renewal period, which occurs from March to April 30 every year. We currently have just over 14,000 SKUs. That's actual individual product choice and offerings. You can see over the history, we have predominantly increased that number. The increase in a number of products offering allows our retailers as well as the consumers in the state to have more choices available. It allows our licensee to possibly have increased in sales, as well as an end result of increase in sales to Michigan and what we contribute, which we will cover here shortly. The MLCC is the wholesaler of all spirit products, so we do purchase those products before they're sold to the licensees. Based on our preliminary fiscal year 23, which has not formally closed yet, but we have done $1.9 billion in sales. That is in spirit sales. So as you think of liquor, beer and wine, we collect the taxes on those. And we had 10.5 million cases sold. This slide, I'm going to cover a little bit of how we actually get the product and how our consumers and our licensees receive that product. So we license a vendor of spirits. That's the actual vendor. A lot of times it could be the person producing that product. They choose to sell that to us at the state of Michigan. They actually will tell us what they want to sell that product for. We don't necessarily tell them what price point to put on it. We have a price calculator online that they can work with, and most of them are very familiar with it. But they list that product with us once approved by the commission. Then we have 3 authorized distribution agents, or ADAs, as we refer to them. Those are the 3 companies that actually do all the delivery on behalf of the state. So every licensee is allowed to, under the law, order 1 case, a standard case. It could be, for example, of 12 bottles in that standard case. They are allowed to order that and have free delivery once a week. They certainly can order more, but under the law, they can order just that minimum and still have that delivered to them by one of those authorized distribution agents. The order comes through the state of Michigan. We actually buy the product once it's ordered and then actually loaded onto the truck for delivery to the licensed retailers. We actually, we purchase the product at that point in time, but there's a lot of other product, as I think the auditors mentioned, that's in the warehouses that actually does not belong to the state. That's owned and controlled by the vendor, whoever actually owns the product, makes the product. Just a little history from those 3 ADAs as to what they do on behalf of the state. This is broken down for weekly basis. Every week, they do over 16,000 deliveries throughout the state. I want to make sure to clarify, because I mentioned that we have a number of licensees. At any point in time, we have for spirit ordering just under 14,000 licensees that could order once a week. However, the vendors choose which ADA to have their products. The state and MLCC does not tell them which one of those 3 ADAs to work with. They choose that, and they actually can order from all 3 ADAs in 1 week if they wanted those products from different ADAs. So there are many cases where a licensee will have deliveries coming from different ADAs within the same week. So that's why the numbers are slightly different. Also, this is really key and important, I think, on our volume, and what they do for us for the state is every week they will hand pick over 1 million individual bottles. So those cases, as I explained, that are purchased, it could be 12 bottles of the exact same product, or it could be 12 different products that they then are hand picking those bottles on a pick line and putting them in the case, creating that specialty case to fulfill that order, and then in turn delivering it to the licensee. The revenue, again, this is preliminary based on fiscal year 23. So if you note, we actually do not receive any general fund information. We fund ourselves, MLCC, licensing enforcement, through not only our license fees, but the sale of the alcohol. A couple important contributions, though, that we also do is we contribute $75 million to the Convention Facilities Development Fund. We also have what we tend to kind of refer to as an additional revenue sharing that is $8 million or over $8 million that goes back to the local communities throughout the state of Michigan. That is based on wherever that license is located. It is based on any new and or renewal licenses. The law indicates that 55% of those license fees go back to those local communities. So it's a very large amount, and we're happy to be able to support them. DHHS also receives a small amount for programs there, $2.8 million. And MDARD, a little over $900,000. That is actually for the Michigan Craft Beverage Council, formerly the Grape and Wine Council. But that is also funded out of part of our fees. And then just a couple years ago, I think it was about 2 years ago, the legislature added in $15 million for a road patrol fund. But importantly, that really big, large part of the pie charts, what I really want to focus on is that the MLCC and everything that we do contributes $420 million to the general fund. Very proud of that. And all of us and all of you should be proud of that as well. You help support that. Before I turn it over to Kevin, just want to cover a couple of the audits that were going on at the same time. Of course, the one we're talking about today, our performance and IT systems audit. Kevin's going to cover how old our current system is. And also our annual audit. I just wanted to mention, we do get an annual financial audit done every single year. And we're very proud that over the past several decades, we have not ever had a finding in that annual financial audit up until now. So now I'd turn it over to Kevin.
Thank you, Carrie. Following the audit engagement, MLCC did create corrective action plans for all deficiencies identified in the audit. MLCC's planned corrective actions were reviewed by the Office of Internal Audit Services, and copies were sent publicly and should be included in your packet materials to this morning. See some heads? Good. Following the OAG's report, there's been some press directed towards the Commission. Most of it centered around the 62,000 unaccounted for bottles of liquor with an estimated value of $1 million. Additionally, the Commission did not conduct physical inventory counts at ADAs between October 2019 and July 2022 due to COVID restrictions and lack of staff. I will address these reports, but I'd first like to take a moment to briefly recap the findings from the portions of the audit involving inventory. It's important to note the OAG findings are administrative in nature. Protecting public health and safety are MLCC's top priorities, and the Commission takes swift action to investigate any complaints that may pose a risk to health and safety. No health and safety conditions were identified in the OAG's report. The process MLCC, ADAs, and retail licensees use for buying and selling of spirits in Michigan is efficient and effective. The software the process utilizes is aged and beyond its useful life. The current system, the software we use today, is mainframe. We believe is over 50 years old, and is built using a COBOL language. COBOL is a programming language that's no longer widely used. Resources to maintain computer applications that use COBOL are limited and difficult to obtain. As a result, the OAG identified deficiencies on inventory are largely a result of this outdated software. Knowing the software's limitations, though, MLCC does have additional controls designed around it to support the process. I'll cover a few of those now. MLCC has resumed performing quarterly physical inventory counts with the exception of the period noted in the audit due to COVID. Any unaccounted for inventory that is identified results in the state reducing a future payment to the vendor, thus making it whole for any damaged or lost goods. And MLCC does require certification from its ADAs on inventory reports that are turned in weekly. The OAG provides a general overview of the purchasing and selling process on page 41 of the report, and Carrie touched on a few of those points in her slide presentation, and I'll take a few additional moments to walk through this. Vendors are required to have sufficient inventory in the warehouse to cover projected sales. The state does not prematurely purchase excess spirits by design, meaning we don't hold on to inventory that we don't plan to sell immediately. The ADA fulfills the orders by first utilizing any bottles held in state-owned inventory, and then MLCC calculates if additional cases of spirit need to be purchased to complete the licensee's order. Thus, spirit bottles in inventory generally have what we call a short cycle time. Generally speaking, it's in inventory for 8 to 12 hours for your commonly purchased spirits. During the audit period, October of 20 through August of 22, 332 million bottles were properly accounted for and sold by the MLCC utilizing this process. To address the audit deficiencies on inventory, MLCC has been working hard on its new sales, inventory, and purchasing IT system. We've coined it the acronym SIPS. It's anticipated for release later this year. The new system has been in development for years. The new system contains significant enhancements and improvements to MLCC's internal controls on inventory. I'm going to cover a couple of these key controls now. SIPS will be the primary source of all sales orders. So you've heard that in the report that was one of the concerns. All sales orders will be included in the system. This will include all phone orders. This will also include all electronic data interface orders that are received typically from your large chain stores. Every invoice will require a sales order that includes a matching order transaction number, helping to ensure all inventory is accounted for. The system will contain reports that give MLCC the ability to correlate liquor orders to sales, thus allowing MLCC to independently verify liquor orders and invoiced amounts, and it gives the Commission the ability to observe variances and monitor for excess inventory balances, whereas with the old system, this was difficult. And finally, the system includes functionality to generate on-demand product purchase orders, further supporting inventory controls. Also, as part of its corrective action, the MLCC is in the process of updating its ADA handbook. The handbook will include all applicable administrative orders, bulletins into one document, thus improving MLCC's general oversight of its ADA partners. MLCC did resume physical inventory counts for all the ADAs beginning in August of 2022, when the COVID restrictions were removed. MLCC has been performing physical inventory counts on a quarterly basis. The last physical inventory was conducted this last May. If we can advance. The OAG reports, so now we're going to talk about some of the other findings in the report. So the OAG report also highlights the Commission issuing liquor license to 3 organizations prohibited from selling alcohol. Sales from these 3 businesses totaled nearly $300,000 over a 3-year period, or a near 3-year period. The Commission has corrected these licenses. MLCC has also taken the following steps to improve its process to issuing state liquor license moving forward. A hold type in Ames is the Commission's licensing software, is located, a hold type has been created that will stop the Commission from issuing licenses in dry communities, and it'll help prevent noncompliance in the future. MLCC has also created annual reports that will be run by management to ensure continued compliance with all nearly 1,700 local units of government, of which 200, a little bit around 200, are considered dry in some capacity. The remaining issues noted on the slide here pertain to some of our antiquated IT systems. With finding 6 during the audit period, MLCC received automated email notifications for select interface failures. Moving forward, and now MLCC receives automatic notifications when any interface fails. For the new system with SIPS that is projected to come online hopefully this year, we will also make sure that all interface documentation, it will be maintained for this system. Finding 7 is dealing with our liquor IT access and security controls. The Commission is working with the Department of Technology and Management and Budget to comply with all state of Michigan IT policy standards and procedures. The commission will be seeking a formal exception request from the DTMB's Technical Review Board, to achieve additional business objectives. Currently, MLCC and DTMB are in the draft stages of collecting all of the applicable details surrounding this exception and validating the documentation before it submits it to the board for this exception. As let's go ahead. As I've initially stated, MLCC has submitted its corrective action plans that were reviewed and approved by the Office of Internal Audit Services. That communication went out on June 7th, last Friday. So again, I'll recap some of those highlights. SIPS is anticipated to go live in 2024. MLCC is actively revising its ADA handbook, and the commission is looking to restore a vacant auditor position to further support and add resources to this area. We'll open it up for questions. On the next slide is Carrie and I's contact information.
Okay. Thank you all so much for your presentation. We really appreciate it. So I'd like to kick us off with a question. I know we have several other members with questions as well. So in your closing remarks, you referenced the vacant auditor role, which will help with controls and kind of monitoring activities. My first question is, how long has that role been vacant at this point?
It's been vacant since actually, it was just prior to COVID. And then once we went into that COVID time period, everything was frozen as far as any hiring for the entire state. So that was not just MLCC.
Okay.
And then with our funding, we actually received the funding for that and ability to do that in just this current fiscal year.
Okay, that was going to be my next question. So you do have the funding for it?
Yes, we do.
Okay, and do you have a rough estimated timeline on when you would ideally like to fill that role?
We are hoping to have that filled possibly by end of calendar year.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. All right, next we will go to Representative Kuntz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Am I saying it correct? Kubaki?
Yes, sir. Nice job.
Mr. Kubaki, very good. Help me, it's my understanding. Please walk me through. It sounds like a double check process. So the sales order on the bill of lading also has an inventory order number. And then how does that, walk me through that process. It sounds like a double check. And then how does the on-demand process fit to that double check process?
So I'm going to have to grab some of those additional details from the commission on that. So sorry I can't walk you through all of this. What I can say, though, is that with SIPS and its improved controls, the data is much more in a usable, rigid format that allows for, things, the system is no longer going to have where it can blow through a control that we would be expected of a modern day IT performing system.
Got it. So that's the goal, is we have a double, I keep using double check. Is that the right phrase? This is the new process?
I think that could
I'm not
be
trying
a
to
good
put words
phrase.
in. Okay.
Sure. Just to simplify, so every time a licensee places an order, it's actually in the new system, it's going to be assigned its unique order number. And then when the ADA processes and delivers that order and that material comes back into our system, it's going to actually have the same order. It's going to match. So we can literally match up. I think your analogy of kind of that checks and balances is good.
Great. And then the on-demand system, just to follow, but the on-demand system, so is that fair to say, hey, this is an emergency order? Is on-demand another?
Sure, on demand.
Okay,
So we
but it's going to
they'll-
follow the same process?
Yes, it will still be in our system, entered in our system.
Got it. Thank you both.
Okay, thank you, Rep. Representative Harris, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for being here. And I know sometimes it's hard to wrap our heads around some of this when we're not actually there doing the work, but we're trying. So obviously we've seen some deficiencies in a corrective action plan, and thank you guys for working with the Auditor General and trying to make things better. However, I would like to know that there's an accountability factor after this, and how do we know that all of these corrective action plans are taking place, that they're making changes, and that we're doing better for the state?
So when the OAG issues a material finding there is a follow-up process. So a corrective action plan is developed, reviewed, and submitted to the Office of Internal Audit Services. From there, it'll get reviewed and then approved. If you look at our corrective action plans, we have them listed more as kind of like a project plan style versus a narrative. So that way we can individually go through key milestones on each one of our corrective actions that we're going to take. To close the loop, for all material findings, the Office of Internal Audit Services will come back and review to ensure corrective action took place and is consistent with the corrective action plan that we drew up. And then, subsequently, there could always be additional reviews by the Office of Auditor General. I will of note, though, say that the financial statements are annually reviewed and inventory is covered as part of that review.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rep. Representative Wozniak.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe for Ms. Crone. The state minimum pricing that was brought into the system a number of years ago, so maybe you can answer, what was the original purchase or what was the purpose of that, changing the pricing on, say, one bottle and lowering the price? And do most retailers participate in that? And is it costing us a lot of money? And is it dictated by the vendor giving us a discount, or are we taking it in the shorts, so to speak?
Sure. I'll try to explain a couple different points to that question. So once again, the vendor actually decides what they would like the ultimate shelf price to be on their product and what they sell it to us for. We do have a markup under the law that's added to that, plus various taxes, which is part of our financial contributions that go to different areas of the state. But that being said, that totals up to what we refer to as a minimum shelf price. So a retailer cannot sell below that shelf price unless they get permission and approval from the commission. There is a process for that. For an example, let's just say some product is not selling like they thought it would, and so they would like to choose on their own to reduce that pricing below that. They do have to apply to the commission and get approval, but we actually actively do that frequently and allow those discounts. So sometimes when you're maybe in a retail establishment, you might see they have certain bottles or a markdown area. If you didn't know about that, you might now want to know and go look for it when you do your shopping every week. But that has been approved and is in the law for allowance. Many retailers do price things at minimum price, and they advertise that. That is their choice. They are independent businesses, so they actually set whether they want to sell at that minimum price or whether they want to sell that product higher. They actually can make that decision on an individual product basis as well. Importantly, the reason why it's there is so that we don't have a licensee that is actually going to sell under cost and undercut other individuals or actually sell it underneath the cost of what the actual state gets. So there's reasons for that too. And we certainly can meet with you and go into more in depth on any of that process. And that is for everyone on the committee. We do a lot of various different processes between the pricing, between the ordering to liquor applications. I know many of you work with your constituents that are opening up businesses. We are happy to meet one-on-one anytime anyone would like. We can do it over Teams and answer further questions of any portion of our process because we do understand it's complex.
Follow up, please.
Yes.
So the retailers taking advantage of the state minimum pricing, are they usually big box or it's small store?
Actually, it's both. I just spoke to a small independent licensee yesterday, and they indicated they are at minimum.
Okay. Oh, my understanding, the original purpose of that whole system was to make it competitive throughout the retail market. Speaking of, on the SDD applications for certain areas, the pricing on the retail end of that, when somebody's buying or selling an STD, seems to have gotten out of hand. Now, is that just because of the market, or is it because of our rules?
It would be market. So if someone actually has any liquor license that they are no longer using, so first there is a process that they can put that license into escrow if they literally are not operating anymore. They're allowed to do that for a certain number of years, and if they need to continue, they get approval from the commission. But they actually can choose to sell. They sell that on their own. The Michigan Supreme Court has ruled in a number of occasions that the licensees have an independent right to those licenses. So they actually choose the pricing. Many times they might work with attorneys. They do not have to get approval from us for any price point. However, anyone they sell the licenses to, before that actually sale is completed, they have to get approval from the commission for that individual or entity to be licensed, because they obviously have to meet the requirements of the code and rules.
Okay, thank you, Representative. All right, I'd like to circle back really quickly to a question that I'd initially asked the Auditor General's team. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that 2 to 3 week delay in the inventory process? Is that a gap that you're actively looking to close or minimize? If so, can you talk to us about that? And then what can the state do to kind of help with that process and that timeline?
I can add to it if you'd like when you're done.
Well, I'll get us warmed up. Carrie's going to play,
Go.
fill in anything I missed here. So it does take generally 2 to 3 weeks for MLCC to balance the inventory. ADAs have 48 hours to submit a day's worth of files to the commission. Once the files are received for a week, MLCC employee balances sales, purchases, adjustments, and inventory for a week for all codes at each ADA. The MLCC employee then balances wholesale sales. The inventory for each product counted that week cannot be identified until 2 to 3 weeks later, when the inventory for those products is actually balanced.
Okay.
So just to add a little bit more to that and to the volume, actually in one of our meetings this morning with our IT group that's in development of our new system, we were talking about the number of invoices that come in on a daily basis. So we'll get 4,000 invoices in a day, just to give you a concept of what needs to be reviewed and balanced by our team. If you simplify, we currently balance on like a weekly basis. Under our new SIP system, we actually will be balancing daily. Now, obviously, it will still take us a little bit of time to do that daily balance, but it should be shortened down, and we're actually really proud that we're going to be moving to that system. It will really help the industry. We actually currently right now, as we do a weekly, if you think of a calendar month, the first of the month doesn't always start on a Sunday or Monday, correct? So we will have some months that might be a 4-week month, and then some months we call a 5-week month. The industry from the vendor side, they like to actually look at calendar months when they're doing all of their projections and sales and things like that. So they're quite excited. I think our ADAs are quite excited as well that we're going to be moving to what we kind of internally call a true calendar month or daily.
Okay, that's helpful. And I'm curious as well, in terms of like the inventory timeline, I know you mentioned getting, 4,000 invoices a day, which is quite a lot. Is there kind of a national standard for turnaround time for inventory? And do you think that the new SIP system that's forthcoming will help kind of get you in line with where you'd want to be? I guess I'm just curious, like, is there that standard? What does that look like in terms of timeline, more broadly?
So Michigan is very unique. We are the only state out of any of the control states that has a blended system where we work with our authorized distribution agents to house and deliver all of the products. The other control states will have their own warehouses and their own state stores. Michigan used to have that many, many years ago, and that was changed in 1996 when we switched over into this new system. So I don't know of a standard across the country or
Sure.
with other states. It's hard to really compare because we operate so differently and so unique. I would say Michigan is a very good state within this industry, and hence the over $600 million and $420 million that we contribute to the state. No other state necessarily is close to that. Most other states don't have the number of product offerings that we're able to have in Michigan. We're able to do that because of how we're set up and because we have those 3 ADAs that we work with. So we're kind of unique. I don't know if that helped answer
It does. Yes, that's helpful. Thank you. That context is always useful. I like to just make that comparison where we can, but that's helpful. Thank you. All right. Are there any other questions from members? Rep. Breen, go ahead.
Hi, sorry again for my. I'm sorry that I just know very little about this. I will say that I prefer whatever Michigan has to what other states, maybe one directly to the south, have, where you try to find maybe a flavored vodka and you can't find one anywhere because it's only in a special store that nobody seems to know where it is.
Speaking from personal experience?
Just a hypothetical.
Sure.
You mentioned your current IT system. From what I understand, it was a fairly obsolete system, and I'm wondering what impact, if any, COVID and the subsequent numerous changes that were made to the laws, any temporary emergency measures. How difficult did that make your guys' job in order to comply?
You want to take?
Sure. Other than, during COVID, obviously things changed to, we were not able to physically go into those warehouses and do inventories. Yes, as everyone knows, we had record sales during the COVID era, as well as almost every other state in the country did as well. But from a capacity standpoint, our system, even though it was old at the time, still is, was able to handle that and handle those sales and those processes. We were just very cautious about anyone going in and out of those warehouses. Keep in mind that those warehouse delivery drivers were stopping and visiting every single licensed establishment that ordered throughout the state. So we kept in close contact as far as any exposure that would result from that. But from an actual capacity standpoint, there wasn't necessarily an issue. We did lose some staff during that time period. I was already indicated, I think even by the Auditor General. And during that time period, we were not able to do hiring for a little period of time. So it took us a while to get back to that staffing.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Rep. Breen. Are there any other questions from members? All right. Seeing no further questions, thank you, Ms. Crone and Mr. Kubacki, for your presentation today. And I know you had a team here, a crew with you from the commission, so thank you everyone for being here. We appreciate your time and also your extending the offer to members of the committee to keep in touch and to ask additional questions. I'd encourage everyone to take them up on that. We appreciate that open door mentality, so thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. All right, thank you so much. All right, and we have no absent members today, so there being no further business before the committee will stand adjourned.